not sure what time you're watching this, so good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I'm Sean Brown, and this is the Chaparral. So a little biome overview of the climate. The winters are going to be mild and moist, and the majority of the precipitation is going to occur in these winter months. The Chaparral is mostly known for its summer months, which are very hot and very dry. The average rainfall is only about 10 to 17 inches. Sometimes the Chaparral can be confused with the desert biome, although Chaparral gets more precipitation and has a little more vegetation. It's composed of mostly woodlands and grasslands, though some would also call it the shrublands or the scrublands, and it's usually located near a coastline. A little interesting fact, it is called the world's smallest biome because it only covers about 2% of the Earth. So some locations. The ecosystem we'll be focusing on is the California Chaparral. As you can see with these locations, they usually fall along the 40-degree north or 40-degree south latitude lines. All right, some of the other locations. Chile in South America. We have South Africa down here. Southern and Western Australia. And right here, a big one, is the Mediterranean Basin. That includes about 21 countries, including Spain, Greece, Turkey, Algeria, etc. Alright, the importance. It's important because of its provision of ecosystem services. Perhaps the most important one is groundwater recharge. Groundwater is a limited resource. We talked about it before. It's used a lot in agriculture. We're pumping it up at a rate, it's too much. It can't replenish itself in time. The Chaparral, however, because of its coarse, rocky soil, when it does rain, the precipitation infiltrates the ground and the soil, and it percolates and goes down to that groundwater and it replenishes it. The local climates, they are moderated through the plants. They take in the carbon, which reduces the global warming, and also through biogeochemical cycles, the water cycle. Habitat provision. The Chaparral, a lot of species call this place home. Human recreation, such as biking and hiking, and then human living. A good amount of people actually live in the Chaparral. Just like city of Santa Barbara, that's right there. Alright, a vacation destination. Why should you visit the Chaparral? Well, I'll tell you why. The Mediterranean climate is perfect. In fact, Aristotle said this is the climate that is the only place suitable for civilized life. It's beautiful there. It's not humid, it's just hot. So it's not like the heat down here. It is much more suitable. Recreation, such as hiking, camping, or mountain biking. There's a couple national parks. I included Pinnacle National Park, has the Pinnacle Caverns, very interesting rock formations, and Channel Islands National Park. And then you can also just soak up the sun on the coastline. Here's a picture of that coastline. Here is Pinnacles National Park. You can see these rock formations, very picturesque. Also picturesque is Channel Islands National Park. You're able to explore these islands. And the last picture, it's just untamed, raw, natural wilderness. Some people really love to explore this. The Chaparral, it's unique because of this and also that climate. So as I stated earlier, we'll be looking at the California Chaparral. The terrain, it's mostly mountains and plains. It's a mixture of forest, grasslands, and shrublands. Latitude falls between 35 and 40 degrees north. And it's unique because of a high occurrence of fires and the ability to recover from those very easily. Little precipitation, so there's a lot of drought as well. The biotic factors. We'll be talking a lot more about this on the species slides. So just a little overview. Autotrophs such as trees, bushes, shrubs, cacti. Heterotrophs are going to be your omnivores, herbivores, and carnivores. Pictured right here is one of the herbivores, the black-tailed jackrabbit. And then your detritivores, which are your decomposers, such as your earthworms, various fungi, and lichen. Abiotic factors. Your average temperature is going to fall between 50 and 70 degrees in the winter, but it can drop below 30, especially at night. It's like the desert, it gets cold. In the summer, 80 to 105, and of course that's just during the day. Seasons, it has a wet and a dry season, like winter and a summer. There's not really 4 seasons in this biome. Average precipitation is between 10 and 20 inches, and it receives a lot of sunlight. Those reptiles that live in the chaparral love it. A couple more. Wind. Chaparral lies in the westerlies. It's going to pick up some of the light breezes from the ocean side, which is on the west. Altitude goes from sea level up into the mountains at 1,500 meters. It's prone to fires and drought, but like I said, it recovers from those quite well. The soil, it's coarse, rocky, and nutrient poor. Disturbances and threats. Right now, let's take a look at that. As you can see, droughts is not listed. And that's because most species have built up an adaptation to survive on little water. So we wouldn't really consider drought a threat if they're well adapted. But some things, prescribed burning and fuel treatment, there's a lot of debris, a lot of shrubbery that catches on fire like that. A lot of people want to take those out to prevent wildfires from getting too big. California is a state known for its wildfires. They spread so quickly. Excess fire. Naturally occurring fires are a good thing for this ecosystem, but there can be too much of that good thing. Climate change. This affects every biome. Species have a threshold of what they can handle. It's already extremely hot here. With global warming sending temperatures up, some species are going to die off because they just can't beat the heat. Habitat destruction. This is due to human development, more people wanting to live in that chaparral. Negative public attitudes. So because of the wildfires, really, they don't understand that it's a good thing for the ecosystem, and they just want to put an end to it and stomp those out. And some species actually rely on that. And invasive species. Let's say you take out the natural shrubbery, quickly weeds are going to grow up, and the shrubs can't beat out those weeds, and those weeds are not as productive to this ecosystem as those shrubs. Cuyamaco Rancho State Park, this is going to be the specific example. They had a reforestation project, but it was not so. It was a major habitat alteration after the 2003 Cedar Fire. So after that fire, they had a wake-up call. They were like, all right, let's get rid of the material that easily burns, like these shrubs. So they got rid of the native plant species. So it was just an attempt to reduce that flammable material. I don't know if they thought this well through, but quickly invasive species took root, like native weed or non-native weeds. Reduces that productivity. Soil disruption. Soil takes a long time to form just the way it is, and disrupting it throws off the whole ecosystem. It also caused a transition from a carbon sink to a carbon source. As you can see with this picture, they did a lot of clear cutting. And when you do that, you get rid of these species of plants that can sequester carbon well. Without it, and with the burning that occurred, it was a carbon source. It released more carbon into the atmosphere than it could take back. And with habitat alteration, you kind of have to ask the question, how much can you alter a habitat before it is no longer considered part of the chaparral? How much can you alter it before it is so drastically different? It's just something to think about. These are some more pictures from it. Here you can see a clearing where they clear cut. Here, this plane is going over, spreading herbicides to stomp out the plants. And right here you can see one of those controlled burnings. Alright, right here I just have the plants listed. We'll get into each one in more specifics on the coming slides. Blue oak, common sagebrush, manzanita, and toyon. They're all producers on the trophic structure. They share common adaptations such as drought resistance and a heat tolerance. It's very hot, very dry in that ecosystem. They have to be well adapted for it. Alright, first up is the blue oak. It's interesting because it can actually shed its leaves and go dormant when it wants to, when it gets too severely hot or dry and it's not getting the water that it needs to. And this shedding of the organic material actually rests under its canopy, and it makes the soil around it more nutrient rich, which is great for everything around that. All those species that kind of take root under it. It provides acorns to consumers, and its roots reach down to the groundwater. So when it's not raining, when it can't get that precipitation, it just gets it from the ground. The common sagebrush, one of its adaptations, it has a bitter taste, which is supposed to ward off some animals, but animals still eat on it because resources are limited. They have to take what they can get. It has an adapted root system. So just like the blue oak, It has deep roots that get to the groundwater when precipitation is scarce, but when it is actually raining, it has shallow roots that are widespread, and it kind of captures that rain that falls down onto the soil. Sagebrush, it has the ability to appear dead when it's too dry, so it's not really, but when it appears dead, the wind is able to uproot it, send it somewhere else, and spreads all the seeds so it can take root elsewhere. Disadvantage to the sagebrush, though, is it cannot recover well from the wildfires. So if the sagebrush is taken out, weeds will take up right there, and it cannot regrow. Next up, we have the manzita. They require a lot of sunlight, very good to be in the chaparral, where there is a lot of sunlight. It's adapted to natural periodic fires. It's very interesting because their seeds have a shell, and the shell has to be burned so that they are able to germinate. The seeds are also eaten and dispersed by consumers. That's how the manzita gets around. And they could actually be at risk due to the public taking action to prevent naturally occurring wildfires. As I stated, their seeds require fire. It's not just helpful, it is required. If the public stomps out these fires, these seeds cannot germinate. Manzanita will not grow. Last plant on the list, the toyon. They have thick, waxy leaves which reduce transpiration. So rain comes down, they take up the water. Transpiration is when the water goes back up. However, these waxy leaves prevent that from happening so it can retain its water. It also has a deep and widespread root system to capture more water. Something I found interesting, they have a degree of inflammability, especially when they're wet. They can resprout after fire very easily from the root crown. However, their seeds do not survive. Their berries are toxic until ripened, so it reduces consumption of them. If an organism eats too much of these berries, it will die. Alright, our animals. I didn't pick these for any particular reason. They did work well on the food web. However, some of them were just interesting, such as this chaparral monkey grasshopper. Some other ones are the California mouse, black-tailed jackrabbit, rattlesnake, gray fox, and mountain lion. Many chaparral organisms or animals are nocturnal to avoid the heat of the day. So they hunt and are active at night. First up, that chaparral monkey grasshopper. It's an herbivore, primary consumer. The colors blend in well with its environment. This one is more red, but some of them have more of a gray, brown, tan variation that fits in with the rocky soil a lot better. It has powerful hind legs to escape consumers, and it's an important food source to carnivores, especially birds. Birds love these. Next up, our California mouse. It's an omnivore, so it is a primary and secondary consumer because it eats both plants and animals. But it rarely feeds on animals. It might eat an arthropod every once in a while, but it's very rare unless other resources such as the plants are limited. It crafts insulated nests to keep warm at night in fallen logs. They are nocturnal gatherers to avoid the heat, and they are a primary prey base for secondary consumers. A lot of secondary consumers feed on the California mouse, or mice in general, because they're very small, very easy. Black-tailed jackrabbit. Look at the ears on this thing. I just love it. And these ears, I didn't know this, but they can control and regulate body heat by controlling the blood flow to the ears. So if they increase it, they can get warmer, decrease it, they can cool down. Very interesting. They sprint up to 36 miles per hour. The soles of their feet are covered with fur for two reasons. One, when they're running, they are pounding down on the ground with their feet, so it's important to have a cushion, but it's also an insulation because the chaparral ground is hot like asphalt because of the sun beating down on it, so it keeps their feet very protected. They're an herbivore, so they're a primary consumer. They eat their food twice, kind of gross, they eat their food twice to conserve water. So they eat it once, poop it out, eat it again because there's still water in it that they need to get. It's very smart for living in a drought-stricken ecosystem. They get their water from plants, so they rarely actually need to find a running source such as a stream. The red diamond rattlesnake. They have L'Oreal pits. It's kind of between the eyes and above the nostrils. They're heat sensors that allow it to find prey. This is very useful at night for small mammals when it's not as hot, so they can see just the organisms very easily. They're heat sensors. It has an awareness of vibration, makes up for their poor hearing. They're reptiles, so they can be active at day, but since most other animals are nocturnal, they prefer to hunt at night when the food is more available. And they are carnivores, so they're a secondary consumer. Another secondary consumer is going to be our gray fox. They have strong hooked claws and powerful legs. This makes them the only dog species that is able to climb trees for food, or climb trees in general. So they climb trees for food and escape predators. The omnivore, they're an omnivore. They're a primary and secondary consumer, mainly a secondary consumer though. They bury food to return to later. If they get a big kill and they just can't eat it all, they will bury it, come back to it later. No waste in that ecosystem. And they have a long bushy tail. Like I said, it can get cold at night. That will cover their body, cover their nose and face, and it'll keep them warm. And our last animal, the mountain lion, puma. They have a lot of different names. They're the carnivore, the tertiary consumer, or apex predator. I cannot say that word for the life of me. They have retractable claws. They come out when it's time for a kill, come back in when they're running. They don't want those claws to snag on anything. Their adaptations are mainly just hunting mechanisms. They have great eyesight, great hearing, amazing agility, and they are silent stalkers. They are natural-born killers, if you will. And they are able to survive in almost any terrestrial biome due to these adaptations. They're at the top for a reason. Alright, now going into our species relationships or interactions. First up is parasiticism. One organism is hurt while the other benefits. We're going to look at the coyote and the Pacific coast tick. So the tick latches onto that coyote. It feeds on its blood. The coyote is losing its nutrients and also has a risk of getting a disease. Here, when a person is bit by a tick, they can contract Lyme disease because ticks are disease carriers. That's parasiticism. Next, commensalism. It's when one organism benefits, the other is unaffected or unharmed, such as the prickly pear cactus and the cactus wren. So the cactus wren builds its nest in this cactus, which provides it with a protected habitat, because what really wants to get into a cactus, those spines hurt, and the cactus is unaffected by the bird doing this. Intraspecific competition is our last one among gray foxes. So this is when members of the same species compete for a shared resource. So this is motivated by food scarcity in this biome. Let's say one of the foxes gets a kill, another comes along, sees that. He's hungry, he's going to attack that fox to get what he has. It's all about food scarcity. Next, we're getting into the trophic structure. Producers at the bottom, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. It gets smaller as you go up because of that 10% rule. There's less energy available to the next level as you progressively get higher. This is a bottom-up control system, and what I mean by that is that it is more resource-driven than predation-driven. So it matters how many primary producers there are, or producers in general. Predation, that would be more control from the top, how they hunt going down. But it's all about how much is at the bottom in the system. Several plant species can be deemed as keystone species. This is mean that they have a large effect on their ecosystem relative to their abundance. They are pivotal to their ecosystem. And we look at an example with the Chaparral whitehorn. They're consumed by insects and small animals, your primary consumers. I realize there's a typo. It should be primary consumers. Effects of bottom-up control can be felt post-wildfire after many plants have been wiped out. So let's say you wipe out a ton of your producers. You're going to feel that all the way up. And we'll look at that with the next slide with this graphic. So a wildfire is going to reduce your consumers, which results in a reduction at all other levels. This is because there's less food for this, less food for them, they die off, less food for them, they die off, and less food for your top predator. Inversely, you can increase in producers, which will result in an increase at all other levels. So a bottom-up control system for the chaparral. Lastly, our food web. As you can see, there are multiple food chains. Some of them can be simple. Right here, toyum eaten by the gray fox eaten by the mountain lion. Only 2 interactions, 3 species. or they can be more complex. Manzanita, eaten by the grasshopper. Grasshopper, eaten by the California mouse. California mouse, eaten by the red diamond rattlesnake, eaten by the mountain lion. 4 interactions, 5 species. So they can be complex, they can be more simplified. This food web does an excellent job of showing the energy transfer. As you can see, the arrow points to where the energy is being transferred, who is eating what. Let's go through a few more just for fun. Common sagebrush, eaten by the grasshopper, eaten by the gray fox, eaten by the mountain lion. As you can see, the mountain lion is the tertiary consumer. He's at the top. Everything's going to end with this guy. Producers, your prime. Let's go through producers, your primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumer. That's a food web. I tried to make the arrows different colors, so because some of them, it can get complex. Food webs don't look nice and neat because in the wild they are not nice and neat. They are all over the place, really. So that is the Chaparral. Here's my bibliography. I hope you learned something new. I know I sure did. Have a good rest of your day, or a good night, or a good day tomorrow.